Take a look at the license plate on any car. It just seems so simple, right? It's just a piece of stamped metal. But it turns out that behind that super familiar, everyday object is this fascinating story that connects your daily commute to some seriously cutting-edge technology and, believe it or not, even the US Constitution. Okay, so let's just dive right into the deep end with the big question. What on earth does a simple license plate have to do with the US Constitution? I know, it sounds like a total stretch, but stick with me here, because the answer reveals this massive shift that's happening on our roads right now. So our story really kicks off with a simple, pre-practical decision. Way back in 1956, all North American plates were standardized to be 6 inches by 12 inches. It seems like such a minor choice, right? But as you're about to see, that one little standard has huge technical consequences for the high-tech world we're all living in today. So how can that simple size have such a big impact? Well, it all comes down to teaching machines how to read, which is basically how technology is now figuring out your daily commute. The key piece of tech here is called Automatic License Plate Recognition, or ALPR for short. And put simply, it's a system that uses cameras and some really smart software to find, read, and identify your license plate from a picture or a video. It's basically the magic that turns a photo of a car into useful, searchable data. So how does this magic actually happen? Well, it's really a 3-step dance. First, the system has to find the license plate in a bigger picture. That's called localization. Then, it has to isolate every single letter and number on the plate. That's segmentation. And finally, it has to actually identify what those characters are. So, find it, split it, read it. But this is way harder than it sounds. Just think about all the crazy variables out there on the road. The system has to deal with bright sunlight, dark nights, rain, snow, not to mention dirty, bent, or broken plates, weird fonts, and all kinds of wild camera angles. Any one of these things can completely trip up the software. So the takeaway here is, making ALPR reliable is a massive technical challenge. So why are we going through all this trouble just to read a license plate? Well, it's because this very technology might just be the answer to a huge economic crisis that's looming on the horizon, the potential end of the gas tax. See, for about 100 years, the way we've paid for our roads has been super simple. You buy gas, and a little piece of that money goes to fixing potholes and maintaining highways. But with the rise of fuel-efficient cars, hybrids, and especially EVs, we're all buying less and less gas. And that means the funding for our entire road network is, well, it's starting to dry up fast. So, what's the alternative? Well, the leading idea is something called a road usage charge, or RUC. The idea is, instead of taxing gas, we'd get charged based on the miles we actually drive. And this is exactly where that license plate reading technology becomes so important. To charge by the mile, you need a way to track those miles, and ALPR is one of the key technologies that could make that happen. But here's the twist. Solving the tech problem is really only half the battle. Because when you try to implement a road usage charge, you run headfirst into a massive constitutional roadblock. And it all has to do with what happens when state taxes start crossing state lines.
And that roadblock comes from this one single sentence in the U.S. Constitution. It's in Article 1, Section 8, and it gives Congress the power to regulate commerce among the several states. This little line is famously known as the Commerce Clause.
Now, the courts have looked at this and said, okay, even when Congress doesn't act, when it's silent or dormant, states still can't pass their own laws that unfairly mess with or discriminate against business from other states. You can think of it like a constitutional guardrail that's there to stop states from starting little economic wars with each other. Okay, so how do you actually know if a state tax crosses that line? Well, the Supreme Court has a system for that. Let's walk through the 4-factor test they use to decide if a tax is actually fair. This whole thing is known as the complete auto test, and it basically asks 4 key questions. 1, does the thing you're taxing have a real connection or a nexus to the state? 2, is the tax fairly divided or apportioned, so you're not getting double taxed? 3, does it avoid giving a special advantage to locals? That's the big one, non-discrimination. And finally 4, is the tax actually related to the services the state is providing, like, maintaining the roads? A tax has to get a yes on all 4 of these to be constitutional. All right, let's actually apply this test to a few real-world ideas. Look at that first scenario, number 2. What if a state says residents pay the new road usage charge, but visitors from out of state just keep paying the old gas tax? Well, that could easily fail the discrimination test. Now, jump down to scenario 5.
Everyone pays the new charge, but only residents get a tax credit to make it cheaper. That's a definite fail. It's blatant discrimination. But then look at scenario 4. What if everyone, resident or not, pays the exact same charge for the miles they drive in that specific state? Well, that passes the test. It's fair to everybody.
So, what's the big takeaway here? At the end of the day, the single biggest legal trap for any state trying to create a road usage charge is that non-discrimination rule. The second you start giving a better deal to your own residents, you're pretty much just asking for a lawsuit.
So based on all this, legal experts have pointed out 4 specific red flags for states to watch out for. First, having wildly different rates for the new charge versus the old gas tax. Second, offering any kind of tax credit or rebate only to your residents. Third, making the technology needed to report your miles too expensive or just a huge hassle for out-of-state drivers. And fourth, having different rules for enforcing the law on non-residents. You get any of these wrong, and you're going to find yourself in some serious constitutional hot water. So where does this whole journey leave us? It takes us all the way from a simple piece of metal to a really complex and powerful data point. And that, right there, is the future of the open road.
Think about it. We started with a simple license plate, but we've seen how it's become the key to this huge technological and legal revolution in how we pay for our roads. And it leaves us with a really critical question for the future. As our cars become essentially rolling data sources, who is it that gets to write the new rules of the road?